Well, we're going to continue focusing on animation because in the world of politics, we have what is arguably a worst case scenario, which I find both sad and hilarious at the same time. Fortunately, I am a progressive minded capitalist, so I can live with either outcome. But at this point, it looks like there's a lot of Senate seats still up for grabs here the morning after the election. And I've seen a fairly compelling scenario that shows how the current count trend will lead us potentially to it all boiling down to Pennsylvania and Michigan. And quite hilariously, if either candidate uh, either candidate has to win both to actually have an electoral majority, and if it gets split, um, then that's a scenario where the Senate, or I'm sorry, the House of Representatives picks the president, and of course they're going to pick Biden, and the Senate gets to pick the vice president. In which case, I presume they would pick Pence or who knows, maybe Trump. I don't know if that's even a possibility if that works that way. But so it's a mess. Oh my goodness. So my preferences about how this would have gone completely aside. I think at this point it's best to focus on cartoons and just wait patiently. I think the key message though for me is, um, despite the fact that I had pretty strong feelings about how I would want this to go, uh, it's important that we respect our process and respect and accept whatever outcome happens. It is what it is. We will survive and get through it any way you slice it. So, anyway, back to the show. Haven't looked at my YouTube channel to even recall what the last shot was that I did, but I believe in the last 2 days I just did this one in Blender 2.9. Also did this one in 2.9. To tell you the truth, I've been grokking out Blender 2.9 so much for the last couple days that I'd like a break. So with that in mind, I'm going to jump back to Krita and just kind of have some fun over here. What's going on is in the script, Golech has made a compelling statement. You can't collect taxes or debts from empty land. I guess I could just show that. So he says, well, maybe Asher has a point, the prophet that they just cast out of the court. So he says, Majesty, perhaps Asher has a point. What? Well, you cannot collect taxes or debts from empty land. Okay. So now the king is like, what do you mean empty? And there's a bit here. So this is, in case you care, Golech. It follows from there. Thusly, Golech is, I hear of nobles pulling up stakes to go north where the land is still fertile. What if Carlina's northlands were part of your kingdom? Vespigi, the king, who's kind of he looks like a tough guy, but he's really a pushover, always being danced around on the head of a pin by Golech, who has had decades to master the art of manipulating the king, as his most trusted advisor. Without the nobles, how can we raise an army? Not war, Highness. An alliance. The prince is of age, as is Carlina's daughter. Can it be arranged? I can only try, my king. Okay, so that's where we're headed. So we're at this line. What do you mean empty? And the next few shots should be pretty easy in the sense that it's essentially just dialogue going back and forth. So, let's say, based on the shots that I've been doing, that we probably need to go ahead and just go to a close-up of Golech. So let's learn about animation in Krita. All right. I'm going to create a custom document that's going to be an HD document. And here in the content, I don't really want the background to be white. So I'm going to go ahead and just take that down to Zilcho. And Boom. Okay, so now we're ready to start, and I'm going to try to follow some of my bester practices and immediately save. My project has seen number, this would be 182. So I'll just go down here and create a folder. 182, and somewhat, I guess, somewhat in violation of some of my habits going backwards, I'm going to go ahead and create the Krita document for now in the folder. So I'm not really intermixing with my storyboard as much as I used to. It's all just, there's no right answer. There's just a million ways to do everything. So let's get busy. This is not a background, by the way. Let's call this a sketch. Okay, so before we get too far, what I'm going to do is let's do a blue pencil thing, and let's figure out our timing. Let's block in what is actually going to be taking place here on a single layer, so that we have a roadmap and a plan. Okay. Did I say this was Golech? This is not Golech. This is Vespigi. So, what do you mean empty? Is his line. Alright, now in the previous shot he was kind of craning his neck around, so let's just say what do we got going here? Oh, I turned the opacity down. Okay, my mistake. I was thinking a background with opacity at 0 meant that it would be like, all alpha channel, not actually the layer turned down. So that's okay. We'll do the sketch in a solid white layer. It doesn't really matter. All right. So let's just say that this is the basic concept of the king's head. Okay. So now we're getting into addressing to a small extent a question that a recent subscriber asked about just the process of drawing characters. How do you draw your characters, kind of thing. Okay, number one, let's say that the king, his head is a very typical head. It's a ball with, kind of a rounded off pyramid attached to it, right? Okay, and then based on that, this isn't probably too bad of a way to look at it. This line is halfway through the ball, and the rounded pyramid or cone comes a little below. So we could basically say that his eyes, if we were going to put circles in there for some eyeballs, we might say that the eyeballs go there. So the key point here, and by the way, here where the cone sort of would intersect with the bottom of the ball if this was not tilted upward like this. So I'm saying that's where this line is, and we'll say this is going to be kind of his mouth area. So the guy's got a bit of a big chin. Okay, now he is, as I said, sort of craned around. So let's give him a shoulder here and a slightly lower shoulder here. So this is the body position. The guy has long hair, so let's kind of put in a couple indicators for how the hair would fall if there was nothing blocking it. And then we're going to say, well, okay, it would actually bump into his body a bit like this and fall over. Another important point would be he's got a crown that he wears, so let's indicate that. The crown is, in essence, a band with a triangle here. And the triangle does kind of curve like this. It's actually a bit of a pain to draw in perspective. But there it is. And what we noticed from the earlier shots and or character design is that basically his hair kind of peaks up right here and covers half of his eye here. So the hair kind of falls this way. On this side, the hair kind of falls a little more naturally. Alright, given that his mouth is going to be here and his eyes are going to be here, let's just kind of take the halfway point and call that nose zone. And then Vespigi has a pretty hardy beard, mustache. He's got fairly snaky eyes, which a lot of the characters in this show seem to have. Alright, so now I'm going to zoom in a bit. Give him the old furrowed brow because he's a little confused, not sure where Golech is going with this. Alright, this eye doesn't really sneak out too much. He is a bit older. Perhaps you could say 50-ish, and on balance, I would say I'm hitting the S key to lasso select, and then the A key to do a free transform, and I'm going to say I feel like his nose really wants to be down a little bit. Okay, enter, Control Shift A, so that I no longer have a selection. And yeah, that's a pretty good rendering of Vespigi. Might be a good time to save our work. So I hit Control S. Now, one thing that is a little off now that I look at this, by the way, I recommend hitting the M key, flipping your canvas frequently. Gonna hit the A key, make a slight adjustment this way, and then slight adjustment that way. I think his face is a little bit wide the way I had drawn him. So now I'm sort of comparing that to the last semi-close-up shot I did of him. And looks like we're pretty well on track. So let's go here. You can see where the solid white background is kind of a little bit annoying for sure, but that's okay. Alright, so here's the king and his actual beard situation. I suppose this is where we can grab a different brush, and now here's my pencil, here's my eraser. Now I can hit the slash key, the one that is on the keyboard alongside the question mark, and literally instantly toggle between these brushes. When I do this, I tend to make the eraser a little bigger. Okay. So yeah, as you can see, the white background's a little bit distracting. One thing we could do, probably worth a try, would be a filter. I think it's a filter. I can't remember if it's a filter or if it's under image. Let me look under colors. Yeah, color to alpha. And let's just pick white. And there, we've solved that problem. So might as well save our work. And his garment is pretty simple. It's basically just a purple, sort of a king colored garment. And let's go ahead and Control Insert, so we insert a keyframe. And honestly, we really don't need to, you know, lip sync is pretty straightforward. So with that in mind, let's just leave it at this and say, other than delineating his hair up here, I suppose. Okay, so there's the king. I think one of the reasons I've been finding his crown a little irritating and distracting is that if you include this curvature, number one, that curvature is really hard to make symmetrical just doodling. And number two, because the way his hair pokes out here, it makes it visually look like it's off when it might not be. So when I'm actually taking my finger and covering up the hair thing, and I can see that it actually looks quite symmetrical. I actually nailed it pretty well. Maybe a slight caveat would be to take the liquify tool. So that's hitting the A key for free transform. That's my hotkey. I don't think that's actually a default. It used to be, but it's not anymore. And then having hit the A key, you can actually right mouse click and choose liquify mode. And that just lets me do a little stretchy poo there. Cool beans. All right, so I'm going to hit enter and Control-Shift-A. Okay, so now that's interesting. As you can see, it looks like Krita threw away my filter, which is a bit strange. But it's not like Krita isn't often riddled with bugs. So I'm going to hit Control-F to simply re-invoke that filter, repeat the last filter that I used, save my work, and that's that. We can get onto ink and paint. This is really only going to be essentially a lip sync shot. I'm still putting in keyframes though. I always put in keyframes just to be safe. Okay. And now what I see is the king's flesh tone is going to err on the side of slightly yellowish. Something like that. Okay, so now we've got our pencil. Let's grab the freehand path tool and let's just start dealing with color. So there's plenty of ways to deal with color. By and large, I find that I don't like using the fill tool any more than I absolutely have to. So for me, it's usually way more efficient to simply use the, again, freehand path tool to just draw shapes of color. By the way, importantly, when you use the freehand path tool, there are two options that are worth noting. One is the default is not filled, and I usually make it the foreground color, so whatever color I'm working with just becomes a fill. And then the other thing is the default precision is curve, which does some sort of post-interpolation to smooth your lines out. I really don't prefer that generally. I generally prefer raw. But hey, for the purpose of the shot I'm working on, let's go ahead and work with it in curve mode and kind of see how that goes. Okay. If I make sharp lines, yeah, you can see how it kind of smooths them out a little bit. So the trade-off is that your lines are smoother, so you're going to get cleaner outlines later when we generate outlines, as opposed to if we did it in raw mode. There might be a little bit of jaggies here and there in exchange for greater precision when we're drawing our lines. So now, what color are the king's eyes? We really don't see the king's eyes in the other shots, but as I recall, they're kind of a steely blue. They're sort of a typical king kind of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and color his eyes in. And now, by going to behind mode, I can put in the whites of his eyes with no concern about accidentally painting over my flesh tone, which, by the way, I'm going to sample right now because I can see I missed a little spot right there. Okay, if we hit the tilde key and solo our layer, we can see how much the outlines are really informing what we actually see on the screen. So making like this and making the sketch somewhat transparent may be useful. Okay, having said that, what about the guy's hair? Well, his hair trends slightly to the red, and it's pretty dark. I'll tell you what I'm going to do, though. I'm actually going to just put in a spot there, and before I do the hair, let's go ahead and get this golden trending slightly more towards yellow crown. So one of the things I do prefer, I must say, in Krita versus Blender would be being able to easily rotate the canvas. However, it should be mentioned that Blender 2.91 has, you see right there, you see what happened right here? Right here I really wanted a sharp edge, but instead it rounded it out for me. So that's what happens when you have the curve interpolation on your freehand path tool. Again, like I said, it's a trade-off. So there's that. So yeah, I am going to switch this back to raw because The cases where I prefer it to do the interpolation are quite few. Hitting the 5 key to reset the canvas rotation back to normal mode. Gonna clean this up a little bit, and then I'm hitting the E key so that I can actually do a little chisel out of this. In truth, the crown sort of dictates the extents of his hairlines, meaning that this needs to come all the way over to here and wrap snug around his head. Okay, and obviously you can see we have a little problem there. Let's try and fix it this way. Hit the S key. Now I'm hitting the A key, and I'm just going to move this up a bit. Okay, and then Control Shift A. Now I can hit the B key, back to behind mode, sample this color, and now let's get his hair in there. Okay, sorry, I'm in brush mode, not freehand path. Okay, and so now we'll get the hair all blocked in. Can just go like that because we're in behind mode. There's no danger of, again, overwriting our the color that's already in there. You can see right here there's a little patch we're going to have to do. No big deal. Okay. And so let's just kind of have his hair sort of draping down like so. And in Vespigi's case, hang on, can't talk and draw at the same time. We do want to make a small correction here as well with the flesh tone. Alright, and then that allows us to easily block in his beard. So, now, there's a good case to be made for not having that lower lip in there. First of all, it's not there in the other shot. And second of all, it just makes our lip sync work more difficult. So I'm going to pull that back out. Going to go into the purple zone. We don't want it to be too saturated. So it looks like, yeah, honestly, kind of in the middle of the color wheel, but then slightly more towards the purple. Should do the trick. Again, behind mode. And let's just kind of get that in there like so. And now let's go into normal mode and make a couple little corrections like this. This, I think, is a little bit winky. And I would have to say that we might as well just get rid of this eye for the most part, and whatever, to the degree we really see it, it's going to be a function of the outlines more than a function of the color. So that's that. Alright, so let's go ahead and do our ink. Don't want it to be black per se, so I'm thinking normally for outlines we kind of add a little bit of red and bring the value up a little bit. Alright, we're not using the freehand path tool, we're using the brush. And this should be a pretty quick operation. Pretty quick operation. Like so. There's the extents of his beard, and then we'll just put some gentle lines in here to sort of indicate the rough and tumble furriness of his hair slash beard. Okay, now we can turn the sketch off and see what we have. Okay, so now I'm gonna say I like that. Now what I'm going to do is actually just paint that in right there. And now I'm going to do the shadows in the simplest way, which is to literally bake them in. So I'm going to go back to my freehand curve tool, but I'm going to activate preserve alpha. Now, there again, you know, Krita versus Blender, blah, blah, blah. There are plenty of reasons why Krita is not the right choice for a lot of these shots. I find the painting and the actual creation of assets process much easier just because I'm so used to it. But, you know, the animation tools are somewhat lacking, and any keyframing and interpolation you need to do manually. You have to do it the hard way in Krita. So, you know, there is that. But now by simply activating the alpha and bring the opacity down to 12%, I can go ahead and just start building this up a bit, like so. The disadvantage of doing this with transparency on the brush itself is that, as you can see here, the shadow densities do stack up, but sometimes that's a good thing. You know, it looks cool. So I'm not going to sweat that one too much this time. So there's that. And we'll give him a little shadow under the nose. It's feeling pretty good. Feeling pretty good. And I'm going to actually use that additional density to my advantage right there. And just give him a little kiss of shadow there. Actually, you know what? This is actually where I think, based on the lighting in the previous scene, I'm actually going to turn this density up. Oh boy, we don't want it to go up that far. Let's turn it up to about 15%-ish. And then let's just go ahead and allow the whole thing to kind of have a cast shadow. Now that didn't work. Okay, why didn't it work? Well, it's just too much detail, right? So what I really should have done is something more like this. Close. I'm gonna say I preferred this at 12, and again, keep it simple, Sherlock. Okay, and then here we'll go ahead and add a little bit of detail there, a little bit of detail there, and essentially, unless we're going to go ahead and shadow slightly under the mustache, essentially we're done. You know, other than the background, obviously. So File, Save, and now what we would do is animate the lip sync, which would be silly to put on the same layer, because if we put it on a different layer, then we can use the freehand path tool, just make it black, and then we will just turn down the opacity of the mouth layer, and we're good to go. So again, his line was, I believe, what do you mean? Yeah, what do you mean empty? Okay. So how do we do lip sync? Well, normally, just as a matter of policy, I wait at least half a second to a full second before I have a character start talking. So let's actually change our frame rate to 8 frames a second, because I generally work at 8 frames a second on this project. So let's just go ahead to frame 8, and we can just start drawing. And since I put in a keyframe here, Krita will just actually strike that. I was going to say Krita will add a keyframe when I draw here, but by default Krita does what Blender calls additive drawing. So when I add more stuff on later keys, it's going to just add it to what was already there. No problem. That's quite useful in many situations. Generally with lip sync, what I would find myself doing is hitting the insert key first to enforce a blank keyframe, just like that. And then I just kind of knock in the shapes. And at 8 frames a second, usually every couple frames is about right for lip sync. So this is an interesting bit of lip sync, because all 3 shapes, what do you are sort of trending towards the O shape. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put in a line and then immediately another key. What do you mean? And I'm going to copy this key here. So he says, what do you mean? And then we can reuse some of these. What do you mean? T. Alright, and where's our... We'll let that word hang out for one extra frame. And then usually what I'll do is go to a key where the mouth is open pretty wide, and then just dial in the density so it kind of sort of matches the outlines, basically, is what I'm after. Okay, file, save. Okay, so we're a half hour into this shot, and other than slapping in the background, it's basically done. So, what do you mean? What do you mean empty? Okay. What do you mean empty? Okay, empty feels a little long. Empty. So I'm gonna hold on. I believe this is the empty. Oh no, empty. Yep, so I'm gonna actually smack that there. What do you mean empty? What do you mean empty? Okay, so of course it's tempting to add some secondary animation to his expression or something, but frankly, for what we're doing, it's just not necessary. Now, one thing that arguably does make sense to put in here is a silhouette of Golech. So why don't we do that? He's wearing kind of a collar thing. That's it. Piece of cake. All right, and so now we need a background, and the background we've been using, it just happens that I was opened to the image that I've used in some other shots. So let's insert this as a new layer. File. Let's save our project. Let's move the background to the bottom of the stack for obvious reasons. And then let's hit the A key, and let's do two things. Number one, let's dial in the size. Something like that. Something like that. And then I think I'm going to hit Control and actually put a little bit of a rotation on that background. So I think that's probably going to feel pretty good. Let's see. Yeah, not bad at all. One could argue and complain that this Spieggy maybe needs a little detail. Now, one thing that was nice in Blender was the rim effect. Let's go ahead and copy the rim effect. So I'm going to call this layer CLR for color and save my work. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to turn on alpha again. We're going to put on white with a slight tint towards yellow, which is what we were using before in Blender. And obviously I should say this, it's going to be much safer to do what I'm about to do in a separate layer. Okay, I'm feeling pretty frisky, feeling pretty confident, so I'm going to go ahead and do it live into this layer. So I'm going to go into addition mode with an opacity of 12, and I'm actually going to again save my work right now. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a rim in there to see if it looks about right. It does. It does. So now what I'm going to do is flip the canvas, and the basic trick here is I've got to do it all in one shot. Otherwise, as I described before with the shadows, the density of the rim light will begin to stack up on itself. So every time you add another stroke, it's going to become a little bit more dense, and we really don't want that. So we need to, boom, nail that all in one fell swoop. Got it. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Now here, I'm actually going to add some extra on the crown because I think it looks cool. And similarly, if we go to black here, Not in addition mode. Probably here we want to be in in normal mode, and we want to turn the opacity way the heck down, just to see how this works. Yeah, not bad. Not bad at all. A little bit of extra shadowing there. And so now we're just into sort of touch-up mode. So I'm going to grab my pencil again, and I'm going to grab some white. Whoops. I'm actually going to rotate this around this way. The thinking here is that if you had a rim light like that, then obviously that light, the glint from that light is going to catch the edge of the crown pretty obviously. So let's just go ahead and do that, and then I think we should go ahead and give him a specular in his eye so that he, so his eye pops a little bit. And folks, believe it or not, in about a half hour, I think we were done. Yeah, 36 minutes. Couple more little things. Let's go ahead and bring this opacity down quite a lot. And I guess if we want to match our shadows, we probably should just click there and type the number 12. I want to just pop his hairline here just a little bit more. That wasn't quite right. It's sort of the right idea, but I want to keep it simple. Keep it simple, Sherlock. That's okay. That looks alright. That looks good. Definitely. Okay, and so now what I'm doing essentially is I'm using the shadowing to build up this edge because the density compared to the background is a little wimpy. Right? So let's just make that pop a little bit in the same way that the rim shot made the front pop. And then, finally, File, Save. Now what I think I'd like to do is probably, let's hit Control M and add a filter mask. Okay, so I'm doing a color curves adjustment, but instead of just doing the adjustment, I put it into, I should probably demonstrate that again, sorry. So I'm hitting Control M, which does bring up the color curves, but instead of doing an adjustment, I'm creating a filter mask, just so that I can adjust this and maybe adjust it multiple times, and I'm not baking the result into the imaging every single time I make a change. So now if I right mouse click on that and go to the properties, I can go ahead and make any adjustments I want. So number one, I'm kind of feeling like the brightest stuff is a little too bright. However, the brightest of the bright stuff probably looks pretty good. So what I want to do, as you can see, is allow the rim light to hold sway, as it were. Let me hit click OK, and then it's like doing EQ in music. You want to definitely switch back and forth frequently. Okay, yeah. And now the other thing I want to do, and since this is a filter layer, I can go in and keep modifying it as much as I need to. I want to basically change the saturation a bit here. The most saturated thing is probably his garment. Let's just see. Yeah, so if we turn it down, you can see that we're losing some saturation in the garment and the hair. Not enough in his face and crown necessarily to really shake a stick at, but I'm going to dial it down a little bit. Now let's just kind of see. I wish this was like GIMP, where we have the ability to sample the image and have like a line come up here that shows us what the what the area of color is that we've selected. That would definitely be helpful. But so dialing down the saturation a little bit looks pretty good. And let's go back to the RGBA and just explore a little bit, see what happens if we knock down the color density. Yeah. So you can see the trade-off is that when you darken your darks, it tends to make your saturation actually look greater. So then as you make things darker, you need to compensate with saturation, and which often means you have to make things darker again. That's not too bad. That feels about like what I was looking for. So let's just turn this off and on. Yeah, that's probably, looking at the timeline, yeah, that's definitely a little closer to what I had before, with the slight caveat that actually we do need to kick the saturation up again just a bit. We're losing just a little too much red in the hair, and well, it looks like, that's interesting, it looks like that really affected his garment. So I am hoping I can restore a little saturation to his hair and his skin, while at the same time dialing down, as you can see, that seems to be working fine, the saturation of his garment. Okay, cool. Yeah, that made it sit in the mix better. Okay, so the shot is almost done. We can get rid of the sketch layer, it's not needed. File, save. The last thing I want to do is add a vignette. Let's just go ahead and have some fun. We'll put this layer, oh heck, let's put it in overlay mode just for kicks and giggles and see what happens. Right, so now I'm gonna go turn that off, by the way. Very gently, I'm not pushing too hard here. Alright. Just makes our character pop a bit. Okay, file, save, and now let's hit the old play button, see what we get. What do you mean? What do you mean, empty? I'm still feeling like I want empty to be a little quicker word. What do you mean, empty? Nope, nope, wrong. It's a disadvantage of being at 8 frames a second. The reality is, it's one is slightly too long and the other slightly too short, but at the end of the day it doesn't really matter much. So cool. Well, the good news is we will be able to jump back and forth. I actually did just notice one thing though that I do want to fix and change. Let me solo this layer. Okay, that does leave the color adjustment on, so I really probably should turn this off to make this one final tweak. And the tweak is I need to sample. Let's go to our pencil. Okay, I need to sample this color, and then I need to rotate this around slightly to something more like that, because in earlier shots he did have this sort of decoration thing going on. Ah, shoot, that's not what I meant to do. That's okay, I'll just go over it. Not a problem. Okay, and then there was a yellow stripe as well. Okay, and now having done that, let's go ahead and cover that up like so. And probably, if we're going to really be complete about it, we probably should go ahead and tighten up the shadowing across there, allowing it to be a little denser than before, because we do want to make that left edge pop a bit. Now, if you wanted to take this really to the next-ish level, what you'd probably do is, you know, you could actually do a little bit of a rim light from the other direction. I don't know if that's a good idea, so let's try it just to see. Let's just keep the opacity down, turn on alpha, and then let's just say the complement to our yellow light would be more of a reddish orangish, which is kind of, let's give it a try. So we'll come up with a fairly, we'll try red, and if we don't like it, we'll switch to blue and just see what happens, and we might wind up using none at all. So I'm going to hit the B key, alpha locked. I want to make my airbrush pretty cozy. And again, this adjustment, we really need to make this pretty quiet. And right now that's white. That's not right. I want it to be something like that. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just go. Not horrible, kind of interesting. I'm going to turn the opacity up and see what happens if we... Okay, that doesn't really work for me. I'm going to go to blue and see what that feels like. That doesn't work either. Maybe do a multiply, and let's just try green and see if it feels good. No, it actually does. It actually isn't too bad. Let's try overlay and see what that does to the sense of lighting. This is one of those things that you could tweak it all day. For me, multiply. Let's split the difference between the blue and the green. And if we undo that, you can see that indeed I think it does actually help a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and add that slight color cast. I think that feels pretty good. You know, as long as we're here tweaking details, let's also grab this brush, go to white, make this really, really quiet, really quiet. And we're just really focusing on our image quality. Here's what we're trying to do. So let's just make it look good, right? That was not quite right. I'm going to make this even bigger and see if I can sort of nab that. Yeah, that's not too bad. Nope, don't really want that to look like a stripe. Close. I would say kind of, sort of, but not quite. The right idea, but not quite the right execution there. I think it needs a little more precision. I don't dare lift my stylus because then I'll have to risk having that happen. You can see right there where the density of the highlight piles up on itself. But I would say, let's call it done. All right, we'll watch it play one more time. What do you mean, empty? Done. As you guys know, there will be